A reading from the Gospel according to Luke. Once when Jesus was praying alone with only the disciples near him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And they answered, "John the Baptist, but others, Elijah, and still others, that one of the ancient prophets has arisen." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "The Messiah of God." He sternly ordered and commanded them not to tell anyone, saying, "The Son of Man must undergo great suffering, and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." The word of the Lord. This recurring story in the Gospels about Jesus asking his disciples to identify who he is to them. And then when Peter successfully does so, he reacts by saying, "Don't tell anyone," is fascinating to me and fascinating to many of us. And it's been no small amount of study and conjecture wondering why that is. There's lots of proposed theories. There's the one where we say, well, we don't want Jesus' true identity to be announced too early because then it might shorten his ministry, and Jesus doesn't want his ministry to be shortened when the authorities come after him. One of them I've heard is that the disciples wouldn't be believed and it would discredit them, and Jesus wants them to remain credible. One of them is the idea that if Jesus is identified as the Messiah by them telling them, it prevents Jesus from being the one to go and proclaim himself as the Messiah. So there's different theories, and the one I actually want to think about a little bit today is this one. It's the thought that the reason why Jesus doesn't want his disciples running out and telling everyone that Jesus is the Messiah is because maybe it denies those people from discovering him for themselves in their own time, in their own place, when they are ready. It's an interesting idea. I certainly have found in my time before the priesthood and then certainly into the priesthood that there's very little I can do to force someone to be ready for Jesus ahead of their time, or to force somebody to accept Jesus as the Messiah when they're not ready. There's very little anybody is going to be able to do to hurry someone along. They often have to find Jesus in their own time, and they need to find Jesus where they need him. They don't need to find Jesus where I need him. They don't need to find Jesus where I want them to need him, but where they actually do. And it's a more organic process. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes forever. Sometimes it may not happen in this lifetime. But I do believe that it's important that people be given the space and the time to find Jesus in the way that Jesus approaches them where they need him. So what can we do? What can we do in this moment as people who seem like if we're watching a Sermon of the Day video, then we're probably mostly already there in terms of believing Jesus is the Messiah. So what can we do to be around those who haven't found him yet, who haven't found it yet, and you can't make them be ready? What you can be is a safe and stable presence around them, to be a sign of unconditional love, to be a sign of kindness and acceptance, so that when they get to that place where they do come looking and they are ready to start, you're there, and you've been around. You've been there for the long haul. We don't want to be those people who hold somebody back at arm's length and says, I won't love you and I won't be a friend to you until you accept Jesus. That's not the best way to go. It certainly is not going to bring them there any faster, any closer. We've seen that. Um, I would much rather somebody get to a place where they're able to look back and see that all this time that it took them to be at a place where they were ready for Jesus, ready to let Jesus into their hearts, ready to accept Jesus for who he is to them, they'd be able to look back and see that all along the way, you had their backs. You were there supporting them, not trying to push them to be ready, not trying to manipulate or cajole, but you were there and you were supportive all along. And in that way, I think I could see this story being one of Jesus telling his disciples to do the same thing. I don't want you running out there and just trying to convince people by force of will that I'm the Messiah. I want you to just go out and be my disciples, so that then when people do find me and find that I am the Messiah to them, they'll be able to look back at my disciples and they'll be able to see you were there all along, being a kind, supportive presence, helping them until they got there. Thanks be to God. Amen.